Good evening, and welcome to the 5th Annual Lea K Green Artist Talk, featuring Curator Rujeko Hockley and honorary conceptual artist Hank Willis Thomas. My name is Daonne Huff, and I'm the Director of Public Programs and Community Engagement here at the Studio Museum in Harlem. On behalf of the Public Programs team, including Cheyenne Marcano and Isa Saldana, who are running the back and front ends this evening, and the entire museum, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us from wherever you may be tuning in from. We are proud to provide closed captioning for this program, courtesy of the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation's Frankenthaler Digital Initiative and Art Bridges. Captioning can be activated by clicking the CC button in the Zoom menu bar at the bottom of your screen. Tonight's program feels like a lifetime and a half in the making. Its first iteration was planned for March 12, 2020. And for those who are based in New York, you know that was the week when everything slowed, then paused, and ultimately shut down. Fast forward 10 months later, and we exist in an utterly new world, still looking for direction, for stability, and for a new normal. So to set a tone and an intention for this evening, I'd like to offer a quote from future seer and truth teller Octavia Butler. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. I'll return shortly to moderate this evening's conversation. Over the course of the conversation, if you have any questions for Ru and Hank, please put them in the Q&A box found in the menu bar at the bottom of the screen. Now it's my great pleasure to invite our Director and Chief Curator, Thelma Golden, to offer welcoming remarks.
Good evening, everyone. I am thrilled to be here with you this evening for our final program of 2020. We are grateful that you are joining us and so appreciate your support during and beyond this tumultuous and extraordinary, incomparable year. This program was created in honor of a dear beloved member of the Studio Museum family and my dear friend, Lea K. Green, who passed away in 2014. During her time at the Studio Museum as Director of Special Projects, Leah and I formed a bond, an unbreakable bond, that was invaluable to me in my first 5 years as Director of the Studio Museum. Her memory remains strong. The Lea K. Green Artist Talk is a means of upholding so many of the values Leah believed in, including celebrating artists and cultivating community. Within the museum, there is an incredible sense of our bond to each other over years and generation of staff, different moments in the museum's history. And that is exemplified very much tonight as we celebrate Lea K. Green with her family, but have a program tonight with Hank Willis Thomas and Rujeko Hockley, two members of the Studio Museum community, beloved to us all. Ru joined the Studio Museum as a curatorial assistant in 2005 and worked on a number of exhibitions and projects, most notably Frequency, the second in the F Show series. And we have been thrilled and proud to watch Hank become the internationally renowned artist that he is today through exhibitions all around the world, but including at the Studio Museum, Frequency, and Speaking of People, Ebony Jet, and contemporary art. I also have to say at this moment that it's hard for me to talk about Ru and Hank and their family and the Studio Museum without even talking about my own life at the Studio Museum, which includes them in such a way, but also includes their families. And I know they are with us here tonight, so I want to acknowledge that. Hank and Ru both knew and worked with Leah during her tenure at the museum. And the three in their respective professions and practices affirm the importance of community, collaboration, and providing access to both artists and publics alike. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to Connie and Lenny Green, along with Leah's entire family and her many friends, including Michelle Brazil. Without your continued support, we would not be here tonight. I'd also like to extend my immense gratitude to all of you who've contributed to the Lea K. Green Fund for the past 5 years. Your support makes this evening possible and allows us to celebrate and honor Leah. You know, I have to say, you all know that we are at a transitional moment at the Studio Museum. We are building a building, quite literally building a new Studio Museum from the ground up. And when I think about the Studio Museum, I cannot think of it without thinking of Leah. And her spirit is throughout everything we do, and it is with me in everything I do at the museum. Now, to share more about Leah, as well as about tonight's speakers, I'm pleased to introduce Lenny Green.
Thank you, Thelma. I can't truly begin to express how much Thelma's dedication to this program means to me, my mother, and our whole family. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Lenny Green, and I'm thrilled to introduce Ru and Hank and also tell you a bit more about my sister, Leah. Leah considered the Studio Museum her second home, and her colleagues became her extended family. So back in 2014, my mother and I knew we had to do something to honor her life and continue to have her name connected to the work that she was so passionate about. So under Thelma's leadership and with this wonderful team that has now become our extended family, we were able to start the Lea K. Green Endowed Memorial Fund at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 2015. This fund, which many of you have been supporting over the years, makes this annual Artist Talk, a public program offered through the museum, possible. And as we continue to grow this fund, we look forward to supporting other public programs through the Studio Museum in Harlem. In 2016, we had our inaugural Lea K. Green Artist Talk featuring Carrie Mae Weems. In 2017, we were honored to be joined by Jordan Castile, followed by Amy Sherald in 2018 and Dawood Bey in 2019. To have these amazingly talented and generous artists to be affiliated with this program is such a gift to us. And we have really kept the excitement going this year, even in these unique times. So I'm especially excited to introduce our participants in tonight's conversation, Hank Willis Thomas and Rujeko Hockley. Hank Willis Thomas is a conceptual artist working primarily with themes related to perspective, identity, commodity, media, and popular culture. His work is included in numerous public collections around the country. Thomas has been the recipient of numerous awards and recognitions, including the Gordon Parks Foundation Fellowship and the Guggenheim Fellowship, both in 2018. Rujeko Hockley is an assistant curator at the Whitney Museum of American Art. She is the curator of the upcoming retrospective Julie Meritou, opening in March 2021. And she also co-curated the 2019 Whitney Biennial. There is so much more I could say about these two phenomenal people, but that's why we're here tonight, to hear from them, to learn from them, and to hear their own words. So we're so excited to witness this special conversation between curator and artist. So please join me in warmly welcoming Rujeko and Hank.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Hank. Hi, Ru.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you, Daonne.
Yeah, welcome.
It's so great to have all these people here. Hi, everybody.
Amazing.
It's an incredible holiday party, which we'll see all of you in person, hopefully next year.
Well, with that, with a lot of internally, something we do is icebreakers to kind of warm us up. So I would like to ask you both in one word or a short phrase, when you hear 2020, what comes to mind?
When I hear 2020, what comes to mind is resilience and gratitude.
When I think of 2020, I think of family.
Thank you. I was anticipating very different responses. So the questions that we will pivot into, will be grounding. So my first question, Art News recently published an article titled "The Studio Museum and Harlem Effect." And this question is more for, audiences who might not be privy to your history and how you came to be. So could you speak about the museum's impact on your individual trajectories? And then more broadly, thinking about the potential for culturally and mission-specific institutions in this moment really leading the way as templates for systemic pivots.
Absolutely. I mean, I think quite literally, when I think about my personal life, my family, our child, when I think about my professional life, the shows that I've worked on, the places that I've worked, the artists I've been really blessed to be able to kind of work with. When I think about my friends, my social life, the Studio Museum has been kind of integral to every single part of it. I met Hank there, we have a baby. I met Christine Kim there, she was my boss and hired me along with Thelma. We're now working on an exhibition together, Julie Morettu's show, which was at LACMA first and will come to the Whitney. Sadie Barnett, who's in the audience, one of my dearest friends. I met her in graduate school. She then became a Studio Museum artist in residence. So yeah, I think the Studio Museum effect, that article was interesting, is something I think that we've all known about for forever. That has been an ongoing kind of ripple reverberation, not just in the art world. I have friends who I worked with at the studio who've gone on to lead kind of social justice networks and organizations, and to work for Tiffany, who I'm talking to you, work for Apple and Beats by Dre, and people who've done all sorts of things, but we all met at the Studio Museum and kind of spread out from there. So the effect is real, and the effect is known. I don't know. What else what would you say, Hank? I'm going to try to stop disappearing in this background. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm here every time. Even though I leave, I'm still here.
I first probably, my mother has been, hi mom, part of the Studio Museum family since long before I was born. And I recall even as a child going to the Studio Museum regularly. My mother worked at the Schomburg Center. Her name is Deborah Willis. She worked at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And between the Studio Museum in Harlem and the Schomburg, I would say almost all of my childhood understanding of art really was nurtured. And I had the privilege of being able to go see freestyle and had my mind blown. And it was really right around then that I really thought that I would, and should try to be an artist. And was really honored to be in Frequency in 2005, where I met Rue, and I met her parents on November 9th.
In the rain. It was a pouring rain opening.
Day that we'll never forget. With so many incredible artists who are all still friends and family. And I think the bottom line is that it is a rich, tight family of people, whether not just be the artists and the people who work there, but the people who have frequented the museums, who have collected art, who have just been taking photographs and been part of keeping us together. And so I'm so grateful to Thelma and to the entire Studio Museum family for keeping this legacy alive for now 51 years.
52. Is that right? I don't know. And then, yeah, just the question of culturally specific institutions is one, I think I went from the Studio Museum to graduate school and came back and went to the Brooklyn Museum, which is not officially, almost 52 years, thank you, Thelma, which is not officially a culturally specific institution, but shares a lot of the DNA, I would say, of a place like the Studio Museum. And then from the Brooklyn Museum came to the Whitney. Which, what I learned, I've learned so many things from being at the Whitney, but one of the things I really learned is very kind of in all these intuitive, unexpected ways, how much both, I think, Thelma and the Studio Museum kind of pulled from the Whitney, but also how much that cycle is recursive, and now how much the Studio Museum has really become a leader in the field in terms of dictating in a very kind of generous and beautiful way that we should all, at these institutions that are not culturally specific, so to speak, though of course that's up for debate, they were all culturally specific, just which culture. But that there are bigger questions and we have greater responsibility on our shoulders. Art is an incredibly important and necessary thing, and it connects to every single other thing. So we can't ignore the rest of the world. That's not a thing. And I think the Studio Museum has really led that by example for especially New York institutions, but I would say as the mission statement goes, locally, nationally, and internationally.
And I mean, yeah, it's changed the world. I thought you were going to say it's just the Thelma effect in general, where Thelma.
But it's everybody. It's Lowry. It's
yes, and Mary Schmidt Campbell, where she was the dean of NYU Tisch when I went there. But I do want to just say specifically how grateful we are for Thelma's tireless dedication. I'm like, I cannot imagine how many names and hearts she has in her heart and mind, and it's really astounding and astonishing and inspiring, and I feel that many of us who've had contact with Thelma feel the need to work harder just to kind of be of support and make her proud,
to keep up.
And so it's really just a great privilege to be here, and for that reason as well.
Great, thank you. So, you know, to think about the role of the curator in a context of really cultivating artists, cultivating collections, cultivating, you know, a visual culture and language in a moment like this, where there is this question of the role of the curator, right? And thinking about the origins of the word to care. And historically, we're thinking about the care of objects. But now it's this recognition that it can't just be about objects, it's actually about people. It's about the staff, it's about the artist, it's about the publics. So, you know, a bigger question is, you know, what is this pivot within institutions, but then also more broadly about artists, even in how they relate to their publics as they're creating and who they are, you know, creating for. Is this a moment of a redirect of what it means to be engaged in this work?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I say often that I really learned, and I'm so grateful to have learned very early on in my career is, and I learned it from being at the Studio Museum, specifically the Studio Museum in Harlem, working with artists. Frequency is the first show that I worked on. Rashida Bambray, if you're here, I love you, we love you. And there were artists upstairs, like they were artists in residence in the studios upstairs. They were coming up and they were coming down. They were like, you want to have lunch? They were like bothering us. We were going upstairs to bother them. And it was a really kind of, first of all, really fun and exciting and just really eye-opening experience, but also just a really profound experience to realize like how much heart artists, how much of themselves they put into their work and how much it is kind of our job as curators to hold that and to really be stewards of it and to be kind of ethical and responsible and to really take care of it, because it's not like a thing, like, you know, a thing, it's like a person, you know, who made a thing maybe, but there's always a person in it. So I really learned that at the Studio Museum, because that's really, I think it is one of the foundational values. Artists are at the center, and the studio space is at the center of the museum. So that is one thing I will say, but I also really think about how the founding collection of the Studio Museum, or, you know, the early days of the Studio Museum were things that people brought to the museum and like left at the doorstep. And like, what do you do with those objects in the context of now TMS, the museum system, and having kind of a system and a organizational kind of schema for these objects that maybe didn't exist in the same way when they were dropped off. But that the Studio Museum has been stewards of those things too, and has taken care of those things too, and has found a way to incorporate those things into this collection that has not been built the same way as other institutions' collections have been built. You know, so I think I would say it's like most things, it's a both and. I really don't want to, I'm all 100% in for us thinking very seriously about institutions as kind of big ecosystems that include the staff and include, you know, people's kind of living needs, include artists getting paid honoraria, include people, like the whole person, the artist, the staff, the visitor, everybody. But I'm also like, I I don't want us to not forget that these objects are important and that they have value that's far beyond their auction resale or, you know, insurance or, you know, it's not, it has nothing to do with that. It's about like a person made this and they really cared enough to put a thing into the world. And like, what a privilege that we get to take care of it and make sure that 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, who knows, someone else can like see it, because we're not going to be here. None of us are going to be here, but some of those objects may be here. And that is, you know, I think of that. That's one of the things I loved about the Brooklyn Museum is like Egyptian collection, contemporary collection, like what humans made all this stuff. So I think both and from my perspective.
I would say also you learned something else about curating, which is the power of an exhibition to really shape and affect the public discourse around really critical issues that might be overlooked.
That is true. I did learn that. I've learned that several times. Very much to my great privilege. Hank, what do you think about being? I think Hank actually is very much a curator, and I've learned a lot about being a curator from Hank.
Well, being the son of a curator
Exactly.
and being married to a curator, and having a cousin who worked at the Studio Museum,
Leah.
Brooks, who's also a curator. I and my Aunt Leslie, who's also here, and hopefully with my grandmother. I think curation has always been a really rich part of my life and my family. And what I was thinking about when I thought about 51 and a half or 3/4 years ago was what was happening in the United States of America. You know, that was the last time my friend Alexei Peskin says the door was open in a way that, you know, the Black Power and the Black arts movements were actually really taking shape and becoming powerful and strong and making impact. And unfortunately, not many things did survive that and a lot of people didn't survive that moment. And so for this institution to have been born out of the need of artists, especially in the community, to care for ourselves, for our hearts, for our spirits, for our ancestors, and for our descendants, is really, really powerful. And I think that Peggy Cooper Kafritz, you know, who it's hard for me not to talk about without crying, because I went to the high school she founded to go into School for the Arts. And she loomed large. I saw her a lot when I was in high school, but I didn't know her until I got to be affiliated with the Studio Museum in Harlem. And she was a dear, close family friend until her last day. And again, these really rich, powerful, strong, when I say rich, I mean like, you know,
Rich in spirit.
Rich in all ways, you know, Black women who don't understand the meaning of no and you can't, and who open doors for those of us who don't know how to open it for ourselves. I might say that, you know, Black women have always been curators for America, for certain.
Cheers. We like that one. Agreed.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Just talking to you and you and you and you.
I feel like it's like going in these new directions, but then it makes me want to, you know, think about, with both of you, the arts were so fundamental to your personal development and trajectory. So this wasn't a question that I'd intended to ask, but like, what were those first art moments for you that really planted the seed of seeing, like for both of you, seeing the world with this different lens or different perspective, or recognizing it is so vibrant and colorful and sound filled and textured, and this need to be connected to those spaces? Because Hank, you could have decided, if the family is creative and curatorial, like I need to completely pivot and rebel in another direction. And instead,
not if you know my mom. You always wanted to go to NYU. You always wanted to be an artist. Mom, I can't draw. Yes, you can.
See, and that is what it means to believe in your child. Yes, you can. You can do it.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
I definitely didn't have a choice. I mean, my dad, I always liked things that he was into, and but you know, the power of Deborah Willis cannot be underestimated, and so she really. I was 30 years old when I realized, wait a minute, I'm doing what my mom did. I was literally, I remember I graduated graduate school. I'm like, how did I get 12 years, you know, all these years in art school and all this stuff? And I'm like, and then I think I actually was at a party around 2003 or 4. And I remember Travis Schoonmaker was there, and I just come from New York, from California to a party, and Trevor was like, yeah, your mom just left, man. It was so much fun. And I was like, wait, okay, everywhere I go, you're already there. And so I would say, I mean, watching this young, beautiful woman being my mother, with so much energy, going to looking at meeting James Vandersea and Gordon Parks, you know, and then, you know, her friends, Clarissa Sly and Carrie Mae Weems and you know, so many people who at this time in my life, you know, like of America, you know, a lot, it wasn't a thing to be a Black artist. It was a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And a calling, you know, Ming Smith and Tai Sing. Just so I just remember my mom would make fun of this. I would say, Mom, I don't want to be an artist because all your friends are broke. You know, like it was all these hardworking people who, like, you can tell weren't being appreciated for their value, and sadly, a lot of them didn't get to live to see it. And now, fortunately, many of them are in their 60s and 70s and 80s, getting honored in ways that they could have and should have when they were my age and younger.
Including, I have to say, I know museums, I don't know who feels comfortable going, who doesn't, but the Whitney just opened an incredible show about the Kamunge Collective, of
Danny
which
Dawson.
many of these people, including Ming Smith, who Hank mentioned, were part of Kamunge, many other artists, and 150%. Dr. Deb, as we call her, was instrumental, I would say, in this show happening, and it coming to New York in some capacities, if only by my channeling of her to say how much we needed to take this show and how important it was going to be for New York and for these artists, and for this generation of artists, because as Hank said, many of them did not get, you know, they did the work and they did the work and they did the work, and there is so much incredible work, but they didn't have the expectation that it would be seen widely, that they would be compensated, that they would make a living off of it.
They did it for the love.
Yeah, and you know, as much as I love they did it for the love, I also love they did it for the love, and they also like made, you know, could like survive. So I'm very happy to see that coming into it too, that it's not enough to expect people to do things for love, because
well, I don't know.
You know, to do things for love when so many people are making so much other money. Let's just say it's a different world now.
Except for, you know,
now.
The reality that, you know, and I can say this as an artist who's finally been able to make a living, or has been able to make a living as an artist. You know, a lot of times when you start getting money, you start thinking differently. I can say personally, you know, about like where the love is placed, and like, is the, you know, and so I think what I really honor about a lot of those artists that I grew up and inspired by was that they were just like, people may not know in my lifetime, and I'm okay with that. And that kind of conviction is going to outlast any art market trend or anything else. I will say another thing that's important about the Studio Museum effect and the Thelma effect is a lot of collectors got real rich. And the Studio Museum should never have to raise a single dime if it was just giving 1% of the money that people have made through you know, investing in the talent that has been nurtured there.
Absolutely. I forgot the beginning of your question. I'm so sorry.
Hi, Olivia.
It's
No, I remember. you were talking about, so I did not grow, I mean, I grew up going to museums, and I grew up as a dancer, and I grew up, you know, taking art classes and being very kind of, I think that if, you know, if my mom is here, but if my mom was going to say it, she could see that I had like a very kind of analytical side, and I had a very creative side, and like which one was going to quote unquote win out. And I feel like now at this perspective in my life, I feel like I actually found the one field and the one path, not the one, but I found one of maybe many paths where you can kind of bring both of those things together, the creative and the analytical. You know, being a curator is a lot of logistics. It is a lot of like scheduling and timing and writing and research and all those sorts of things, but it is also this incredible collaboration and creativity, and like you do get to think about things. You know, you learn new stuff every single show. Like every single show is like, you know, is a graduate degree, because the artists that you work with are so knowledgeable. Like they have like 6 PhDs in the thing they're talking about. So I would say that. And then, you know, I often think when I went to Columbia as an undergrad, I studied art history, and, you know, we had to go to museums around the city. And one of the things that I really remember is the Jacob Lawrence, the migration series that was at the Whitney actually in that time. And that is like really because, you know, we'd gone to the Met, we'd gone to the MoMA, we'd gone to the Frick, we like had to, all of which are incredible institutions. They did not send us to the Studio Museum, which I hope they do now. I went by myself, seeing as they're neighbors, but also another conversation. But yeah, that's one of the things that I really remember being struck by so deeply, having like a really deep kind of art experience that was really powerful, that I was like there for hours. I wanted to look at every panel. I wanted to read every panel. I came back, you know, I told people about it, and it just was it was just such a lightning bulb for me around the power of art to kind of tell stories, and to kind of express not just the desires and the needs and the interests of an individual, but of a community, of a people, and of a nation. So yeah, that was, I really always think about that as such a special, because it hadn't happened for a long time that they'd been together.
And I think that's a great pivot to think about, one, Hank, and you talking about in reaching a certain status, it provides opportunity. And Ru, you know, thinking about the power of art, it's not about just this individual, but this community and collective collaborative effort. So I kind of want to, you know, think, Hank, to, you know, the creation of Four Freedoms and the Wide Awakes, where it wasn't this individual act. It's a long, festering, percolating planning process of collaborators across spectrums, not just artists, but, you know, activists and thinkers and, you know, public engagers to create something that is greater than. But it also is pushing how we define art and what is art, and thinking about, you know, an art that is more ephemeral, that is about a legacy of planting seeds. So, you know, I'm, you know, thinking about in a moment like this, where it's so much about this moment of capturing a moment, to think about projects like this, which feel very rooted in this nowness. But I'm assuming you're also thinking about a future in this kind of creation. That was a lot. That was a long comment question, but hopefully there was something you can pull to respond to.
It's funny, when I think about the future, all I think about is wanting to be there for my daughter. Like, I'm like, I want to be an old, happy Black man. You know, I'm aiming for 88, but it depends on what the science has at that time.
Okay.
I might go for 120. And that's all I think about. And my desire, I mean, in order for me to be an old Black man and happy, that means there's going to have to be a planet that is habitable. That means that I will have been able to, and the community will have been able to thrive, and that I will be at peace with whatever contributions I did or did not make. So everything I've ever done has been, everything I've ever done has been actually towards that goal, because my Uncle Cecil is in his 90s, and I just, every time I see them, I'm like, that's a pure act of defiance, you know, being an old Black man.
And happy.
and can laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. And I don't believe in race. I live in someone else's fiction, which is real. You know, of course I understand and believe in ethnicity. And so I'm a proud African American, but race is it's a game that's being played on us, and we didn't make the rules. And so my work, whether it be Question Bridge Black Males or the Truth Booth or Along the Way or the Cause Collective or For Freedoms or the Wide Awakes, is really about building webs and intersections for those of us who can understand that this is a game that's being played on us. And to that end, oh, I guess I should talk just really. Okay, I want to share screens. Share screen. Hank, can you share screen? Sharing screen is disabled. Uh-oh. May not happen.
We're gonna make it happen. It's gonna happen.
Made it happen? Uh-oh.
Okay.
Let's see. Uh-oh. Okay. Can you see this screen?
Yes.
Good. So this is forfreedoms.org, and our campaign this year was called the 2020 Awakening. And it was because we anticipated that even before COVID, that this year was going to be a year of new visions, and that we needed to actually really come together around that. And so we actually tried to develop a rule book for thinking, for playing a different game, which is called the Infinite Game. The games of capitalism and industrialization and racism and sexism are finite games. And much of the way in which we merit people in education and even in the arts is finite. And, this is time for an upgrade. We're the 2.0, and everyone had a wake up call in some way or another this year. And I'm just going to ask us to take turns reading the rules, because we're like, if we're going to be playing this game, we need to actually have some guidelines. And Carrie Mae Weems she came to my studio and talked to a bunch of us, and she was just like, there's a lot of room for seriousness in play, but there's not a lot of room for play and seriousness. And if you take it too seriously, you can't be creative. You can't actually challenge challenge anything, because you get exhausted. And so the object of the play is to continue in a state of play. And so these are the rules written by, I don't know, at least 10 different people. I contributed, I think, 1 or 2 lines here, but it wasn't my idea to make this rule book, but I love it. And Daonne, can you read rule number 1?
Yes, let me blow up my screen. 1, no one plays alone. You know nothing you need to know. The rules always change. Love overrules.
Number 2, there are no gatekeepers. Bring people into play. Be where you are. Carry your own trash.
Rule number 3, learn from feeling. Let love quiet fear. Nourish joy. Go there.
And rule number 4, you're just in time. Leap before you look. You know everything you need to know. Together, we are awake.
Daonne, there's an asterisk there for you.
And is that you?
Yeah.
Am I reading it?
That's you.
I'm reading it. And seriously, don't take yourself too seriously. That feels very personal, Hank.
Play on, player. So that these ideas of like playing this game that can hopefully lead us to through this awakening to and deep listening to a greater healing of ourselves and also to the body politic and a new understanding of justice. And these are the things that we were thinking about. We started thinking about the election, what are the short-term goals of increasing the joy of voting, and then the long-term goal is building a political and cultural identity around listening, healing, and justice. And this is towards my, 88, which you can see in the number infinite 88. Get it. And so our values are insisting on the future, provoking bigger questions, presenting nuanced stories, nourishing joy, listening until we hear, bridging binaries, being visionary, not reactionary, and playing the infinite game. So I hope that if you catch me all downtrodden and shook, that you'll encourage me and remind me of my long-term goals. This was also really exciting because one of the odd circumstances of the pandemic was that Rue got to be home a lot more and was
all the time
part of a lot of the thinking around these projects, and in some ways could be seen as a collaborator. Hey, Isolde.
Hey, Isolde. Also Connect met at the Studio Museum.
And gave me my first show in New York.
It's all full circle. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's been really amazing about this experience, about this year, though much obviously has been really horrible and horrifying, is that I got to see in a really different way the way that one of Hank's and many collaborators' projects really comes to fruition and continues. You know, I think something that, you know, I've learned from having an artist as my partner, from living with an artist, from spending now like all my time with an artist, is how deep the thinking is. Like Hank first started talking about the wide awakes, the historical wide awakes from 1860, like years ago. Years, like excited, like, you know, Googling research, like he had one of his people in his studio team went to Hartford to go to the archives there kind of her own volition because it was like so interesting. And this like way predates kind of what we've all seen in the public facing part. And so I think it's been, and I knew that from my work, from my professional life, from working with artists, but it's really different to know it kind of personally and to have seen it. So it just, it's been really amazing to see like this thing that was just an idea, that was just like a conversation, that was like, oh my God, have you seen these people with the capes and the iconography, and like, it's, who are these people? What is this? Like how, and it now be not only like that we now know more about them, because even, you know, Hank and Eric Gottesman, his collaborator and For Freedoms and co-founder among others, went to see Eric Foner, right? Who's an incredible historian at Columbia, expert, specialist, whatever in this period. And he was like, oh yeah, I don't really know that much about the wide awakes. And so it's been really incredible to see like that knowledge percolate out into the world because of artists, you know, and I just don't think, and then to have it be followed up and kind of transformed and made into this really expansive, generous kind of open source thing. There's wide awake chapters like literally all over the world if you go on Instagram. And that is like, there's no like oversight, you know, kind of being like, okay, yes, you, no, you. Like, it's just like people being excited about this idea that we kind of, especially this year, are all having some sort of an awakening. And also that we are like, you know, I think of one of Sadie's drawings, We All We Got, which is, you know, not only her saying, of course, but I think of Sadie when I think of We All We Got. And I mean that in the most like generous way, the most generative way. Like, we all we got, all of us. Like, it's just us.
No one's coming to save us. We're our own superheroes.
Yeah.
And that's why we get to wear the capes and, you know, hopefully have fun.
And we can save each other, you know, and we can save ourselves. And and as Hank said, like, none of us get to be old, happy, gray, without like really addressing climate change, without really thinking about racial justice, without really thinking about what it means, you know, what patriarchy has done to the world, what it really means for, you know, discrimination against different genders, etc., like sexual orientation. Like, none of us get to that end goal without really addressing all this stuff. And so that's when I say gratitude, part of me is like, wow, we get to like really realize once and for all, like, there is no other option. Like, there's no other world, there's no other path, there's no other way. Like, we have to deal with it. And obviously gratitude also to be here and to be able to like be alive and do the work and live the life that we're really lucky to be able to live. Everyone, all of us.
Yeah. Hank, did you want to add something?
No.
Somebody from the Wide Awakes, Colorado is here. See? Hi.
Okay. So we're at 6:45, and I wanted to ensure that if people did have questions, please put those in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those as much as we can. So let's see. So a question from Sana Musama. Hank, I remember you as that little boy of Debbie Willis at these cultural events. You state you had little choice with her power. My question is, will your daughter have a choice?
If you met her, like
Hard one.
I was definitely, I like to be told what to do. I come from a family of really powerful, joyful women. And it was easy when they were right to just follow. I believe my daughter is one of those people. So I'm definitely going to be following her. And Eric gave me a really nice compliment the other day when saying that one of the things that he loves about me is how I just I let her be her, and I take her lead, which is something that I don't feel. Again, I don't have a choice. If you look at her, I mean, she's got my mom in her, and Fadzai, Rue's mother. So like these are the world tried to say no to them, and they were like, nah, yes.
That's true. I mean, I think, yeah, she has, I think, the choice is hers, and it'll be interesting. I think often of one of my other great mentors, Eugenie Tsai, who I worked with at the Brooklyn Museum, her son, Juki, her and Tom Finkelpearl's son, Juki, he like grew up going to openings, dragged everything, she always talked about how like Juki would always there was a point where he was into it, and then there was a point where he was like, oh my God, again, like we're here again, all these people, why are we here? Like bored in the corner. And was like, I don't want to be in the art world, I'm not interested in that. And he went to college, did all these other things. But he's actually kind of come back around, not as a curator or as an artist, but like as an arts administrator, as a person who kind of works in kind of thinking about like how to run institutions and how to connect to the public, and really thinking about them as public institutions. So it's like, you never know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So often in school, what it means to be in the arts is kind of limited to being artist or curator or art historian, but there's this whole spectrum of possibility. And it's really just a matter of really opening up
Absolutely
the nuances of the industry. But I think it's important to put it on wait, did you? Yes, talk.
Put it on record. It's being recorded. One day in the future, when she's like, my parents are so boring, I'd be like, oh, leave her cool. We didn't talked about you.
What do you get to say?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, you said it's
put
important.
it on
yes, the record. So that art is essential. It is not a luxury.
Absolutely.
It is a necessity of society. And in a moment like this, that I'm y'all are at a certain level of your practice, but this grappling of what is essential and non-essential, like our jobs, our existence now are kind of in these two categories. So in this moment, in this space tonight, I think it's really powerful the more that we can really articulate that, the way we view art is not just what hangs in a wall, but it's like what you're both talking about is like artists and creatives as visionaries of problem solvers, of seeing the possibility in what seems impossible. So, for those who are emerging or who are still navigating at a different spectrum, like in this moment, like, what would you suggest? How do you enter? How do you pivot? How do you make that imprint in a time where it feels so difficult?
I don't think it's ever easy, and it should never be easy to follow your dreams. And therefore, if it's hard, you're probably doing the right thing. If you don't feel like doing it, but you keep doing it, you're probably heading the right direction no matter what it is. I also wanted to say happy belated birthday to Kemi.
Happy birthday, Kemi. Yeah.
And shout out Cat Gun and Aggie Gun who are here, because that's another way in which you can see that the generational legacy. The film Aggie came out this year, and I'd known Cat for a long time before I realized that she was part of ACT UP, and learned that generation of artists who really decided it was necessary for artists to be directly engaged in civic action to help save lives, and that silence equals death. And so many different communities of artists from generations do this really critical work. And I think what is unfortunate is that you have to be lucky like me to be like able to be like, wait, you were part of that, and a lot of the work that we've also wanted to do is be in the space. I'm like, I want to say hi to everyone. Hey, Joe. But to like connect the gaps between generations, because there's so much knowledge in every generation, and then we almost always start over.
Absolutely.
And so for younger artists, I think it's critical, and younger people who want to be involved in any way, I think everyone's an artist. It's important, not for them, it's important for us, literally for our survival, to make sure that they know who we are and that we can connect to them and that they connect to the broader community, and that they don't think that any of us are any more special than them. And so to anyone, I will say, I've seen people do, and this is an imaginary thing. I see people in very high prominent places that when they used to be a joke. I mean, I might be one of them. I might be one of them. So, but like, it doesn't matter. If you believe in yourself and you truly believe in yourself, others will finally get the hint. And then, that's where the respect comes, when they're just like, okay, I was hating on you until I realized that like I was hating on myself because I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to learn from you. And I think that's where I go. Like, you don't got to go to school. You can. It's cool. You don't have to like be the best. I was definitely not the best artist in my graduate program. You don't have to be related to someone else who's been in the art world. You don't even have to be able to speak English or to speak at all. You have to be able to and be willing to put yourself out there regardless of the stakes.
Yeah, and I mean, I really come back to Linda Good Bryant all the time. Linda Good Bryant's one of my favorite people, and a Studio Museum alum also. Her gallery just above Midtown was maybe founded in response to feeling constricted by a certain generational moment in the world that played out at the Studio Museum in specific ways. But one of the things she always says, and has said since like throughout her whole life until up till now with Project Eats, is like, we can do it. Like, if you need it, make it. Like, if you want it to be in the world, put it in the world. That's the end of the sentence. Like, that's the whole story. And so I think in terms of thinking about this time, and yes, the very real difficulties, I've worked at museums, and I really feel incredibly grateful to have worked at museums. I don't necessarily think everybody who wants to be a curator, or who wants to make an impact, or who wants to do really important, world-changing, paradigm-shifting shows has to do that at a museum. I think you can. And, I feel like I have been very blessed to do that on maybe 2 occasions, and hopefully I'll get to do it more. But, I think that we're in such a time of like, let's be expansive in our thinking. Like, let's think about all the many paths. Yes, someone just said that. There's so many paths one can take. I'm thinking about Kemi so much right now, not just because it's her birthday, but because she came and spoke to a group of us at the Whitney, taking time out of her very busy day. And she and many other people have had such an interesting path to be where they are. And I think
the Laundromat Project in
general.
general.
The Laundromat Project in general is incredible, like the history of that entity and that organization. And so I think like, when I am guilty of this. I've often looked at people that I admire who I'm like, oh my God, I want to be like that. Like, I want to get like that. And I kind of look at the steps they took and kind of try to backdate, like, okay, so should I do this? Should I do that? And I think the real thing is like, you should do whatever you feel really moved and like cannot do other things. You should do that. And that can be all sorts of things.
And I also get inspiration from people like Barack Hussein Obama.
Who, that's that guy.
While the Iraq War was raging, decided to run for president. And even Donald J. Trump, like, who would have ever thunk that he would be president? And like, that's because they believed in themselves.
Not him.
So like, I'm like, you're the one election night.
He didn't believe it.
Now he pretends he don't want to go, but we know. But really, that's where I get my real inspiration. Is like, wait, there's like, no one would ever, if you bet anybody $1 million 2 years before they became president that they would be president, no one would believe that, and I think even looking at, the vice president now elect, what in her history would have ever told us that she would be where she is. And so that's what in this infinite game that we are already invested in the art world, where we're literally transmitting and translating energy and ideas, as long as it's inspiring and therefore likely creative, then you have boundless wealth and can do anything.
It's like mic drop. Just wanna. I think that's a really beautiful way of wrapping the conversation. Any last thoughts, sentiments, one-liners that you want to put out there to plant the seeds for 2021 as we go forward, because there is only forward?
I think one of the things I also think about a lot is, this is kind of left field, but is the cave paintings at Lesko. Like, one of the things that like humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, do is art, like, period. And so to this, what you were saying, Daonne, about this essential and non-essential, it's like, it's essential. Like, it's across cultures, across time, across nations, across all the ways in which we've decided to split ourselves up, to divide ourselves from one another, to be apart, say, I'm not like that, I am like that. Art, people they express themselves. And it's like an innate need, obviously, for the species. And so I just feel like let's not forget that. Let's not forget that we are essential, that all of us are essential. And, I think about In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Alice Walker's incredible book about kind of earlier, the ways in which creativity was expressed and has been expressed by people who weren't seen as artists. And yeah, as Hank said, everyone's an artist. That's still art. And so, yeah, like, do what you're doing, keep doing it, and really like think about how we can continue to lift up all the people who've been deemed essential workers, who before this experience we didn't really value.
We're seen as unessential.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't really value them. Like, we didn't pay attention to the postal workers and the garbage truck people and the people who deliver food, and the people, the people who work at pharmacies, the people, the people who do the Amazon like grocery thing for you at the store, like the Amazon workers, period. The people who package all the things we're buying online, like, we didn't think about any of those people in the way that we should have. And I hope that one of the things we take into 2021 is really like, and many and beyond, is really a respect and an acknowledgement of the work that all of those people do. And I would add artists to that, because I think that we have such a like skewed view of artists. And sometimes it's influenced by the market, by auction results, by things like that. But we don't think about, like, artists make all the shows that we have been watching throughout the pandemic. Artists make the music that we've been listening to. Artists have, they write the books we've been reading. They write the poems, the plays, all the things, the art on the walls that we haven't been able to see. But people, apparently one of the most Googled things is like, virtual museum tours during this time period. And so it's like, there's a hunger for this. And at the center of all of it are artists who are, people.
And most of what we know about previous civilizations is through the art.
Exactly. That's like all we have.
And so it's, as long as art is a charity, we have not done enough. Because we are doing the work of humanity, those who work in the institutions and who protect and preserve and tell the stories and nurture the artists, and all of those people, including the patrons, just people who go, are preserving human history and for generations to come. And so I want us to go into 2021 recognizing that everything that we do is important, is historic. And therefore we can't be afraid of failing, because it's not possible on the infinite timeline.
Okay, and the last thing I want to say is parents, and especially mothers.
Thanks.
No,
Hi, Dad.
you're incredible.
My dad's pretty cool. Your dad's
my
pretty
dad's
cool.
amazing. Your dad's amazing. Many dads are amazing.
Hi.
Parents, I'm going to use the gender neutral parents. But, you know, I think also we're not workers per se. But I do think another thing that I really hope that 2021 and beyond brings us is the understanding about how we cultivate and shape people, little people, but also big people, and the ways in which we are all so lucky to be mothered by people of all genders, whether we're related to them or not, whether we met them 40 years ago or last week. You know, I think we all have so many mothers, so many people that have cared for us, that have shaped us, that have cared enough to make sure we're okay, to give us advice, to give us jobs, to connect us to the people who might give us jobs, to introduce us to our partners, to our best friends, and then also to raise us so that we can be people in the world. And so I think, yeah, teachers, mothers, all the things.
Museum educators,
we talk
though.
Too much.
Museum
so
educators,
chatty.
like that, because that's the other thing that I feel like there's so much glory in the curatorial side. But you know, if there aren't, I mean, without the museum educators, without the volunteers and the docents, but also the staff, like there's literally nothing. And
absolutely, 150%.
So thank you so much for your work with the programs and the community, and thank you for your vulnerability and your. I feel like you've been around for some time now, Daonne.
Are you looking at me? I can't.
Yes,
it's hard to see. Like, where are you looking?
No,
the thing is,
if I'm looking at her, I'm like this. I'm looking like this. I'm looking at you.
Yeah. Well, I work with Isolda. Isolda was my first.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Thank you for your dedication, and
absolutely.
I hope you and your family are proud. And we are so grateful for you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I just have some, official comments to send us off, but Hank and Rue, I can't think of a better way of wrapping what has been just a crazy year, but also a year that has shown so much possibility, and recognizing the silver linings of as much there has been so much tragedy and heartbreak. There's been a lot of innovation and forward momentum for change that hopefully is deep rooted. And ever growing. But I just want to thank the audience for choosing to spend a portion of your Thursday evening with us. We know the options are limitless, and Zoom fatigue gets realer by the day and night. If you enjoyed this program and want to ensure more like it can occur, please consider contributing to the Lea K. Green Fund. More information can be found on our website, and a link is being put in the chat box. With that, I say goodnight until 2021. Stay well and take care. Thank you again, Hank and Rue, so much. Thank you.